I'm a little bit different from most people in that I'm a twin. Schooling was fabulous. I had a lovely time at school. I had no idea what I was there for, but I did have fun. My parents think, oh God, what are we going to do with Richard as time goes on? And any time the word exam was mentioned, my parents were really concerned. The school would sort of say, oh, I think we should work in a factory, Richard. What? Having said that, I did get O-level in metal work. Got nothing else, but there we are. So I was really, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then one day I was walking down my road, and one of our near neighbours I had a chat to. He said, "What are you doing now, Richard?" "Nothing." "What are you going to do?" I said, "I've got no idea." And he was a manager at Thomas Cook. Do you know Thomas Cook? Then it was the world's largest travel and financial services company. And he was manager of the head office in Barclay Street. So I said, well, why didn't you apply there? You know, might better help, and I don't know whether he did or not. Anyway, cut a long story short, went for an interview, filled in a few forms, and got a job on their mildly unstructured management training program. And from that moment on, I really started to enjoy work. I loved it. Training courses, it was like, you know, okay, today we're going to learn the capitals of the world, or about the train line from Paris to the south of France, or you know, some Maharaja train from Delhi to Jaipur, or whatever it might be. And I was thinking, this is all rather interesting, but when am I going to get to these places? Because that was the whole reason I joined Thomas. So I thought I'd be travelling the world first class, doing a bit of everything. I worked in the internal areas, but travel, tourism, spoke tours. And I think the first branch I worked in was in Fleet Street, the second one was in Pall Mall, and I was in the business travel, so handling all the travel arrangements of companies. And the company I looked after was Marks and Spencer's. And you know, they were, you know, the top account, and for some unknown reason I was given the responsibility of that. And Mr. Burt, who was the travel manager at Marks and Spencer's, I was told, he's a pretty demanding person. If you don't deliver, you know, your legs are off. So that gave me a bit of direction. I better get things right. And I really enjoyed that side of it. I moved on from there. And then I think my first real break in terms of direction came after that, in terms of, I went into the business travel centre at the headquarters at Thomas Cook in selling business travel to companies. So Gordon Gibson was my boss, and he had a company car, and I've always coveted to have a company car. So I thought, this looks a good direction to get into. You know, a car you could drive, and it didn't matter how much you thrashed it. It would be repaired and looked after and all the rest of it. So I got this job in the business travel, still part of the general training, and we went out to the Slough trading estate. Still a big trading estate there, and I went out with Gordon, and I was shadowing him for a day or a few days. And we pulled up outside this company, and he said, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, Richard. We need to sell Thomas Cook, and you need, you know, our objective is to go into companies, tell them that travel agent's rubbish, and get them switched to Thomas Cook. So I said, great, let's go. And I said, well, you're going in this one. What? So I'm sort of pushed out, going on my own to this company. I think it was probably, it wasn't structured in terms of, there were no pre-appointments, it was cold calling. You sort of go into the receptionist and say, can you talk to an exec, you know, chairman or managing director or whoever it was, and talk to you and sell this. And I learned from that very first sales call that you need to be prepared. You need to have some structure. You need to do what you guys have just done. Have a little bit of a 10-15 minute briefing and go ahead. And things really went on from there, and I really found my forte of, and I thought this selling game is really great. When you get a sale, wow, does it feel good? And you get back and people sort of tap on the shoulder and say, you're not doing good enough, you've got to do better. So you get a sense of excitement all the time in your job. And that's, I looked around at other people and I thought, God, they look bloody miserable sometimes. So I like that. I did that. I did get my company car. I did travel around. I travelled around all the Thomas Cook offices, cracking the whip, telling people they were also part of the selling process, knocking on doors, and that's where I did my first little bit of entrepreneurial sort of activity. Because I read in the Telegraph one day, in a little advert section, someone advertising for supplement your income, typical sort of advert, earn a fortune, selling blah blah blah. And I phoned up this guy, and he then was the owner of Diners Club. Anyone ever heard of Diners Club? Mm-hmm. It was the world's largest credit card in the 60s and 70s. So it was selling that, and I realised that the customer base was exactly the same as it was for selling business travel. So I tried to be a little bit ethical of not selling Thomas Cook and then saying, oh, by the way, would you like a Diners card? So I identified, we were calling it the very big companies, and the card I targeted at the more medium, small enterprises. So at the same time, I'd be knocking on the door. Then I started to think, God, it was so good, and all you had to do was say, I think you would really benefit from a Diners card. It's very prestigious. In the position you're in, I'm sure you have one, but if you don't, fill out this form. I had my code on it, and then they would often send it off. Sometimes I take it back with me. And for every single one of those which was approved, I got something like £5. Well, £5 in those days was the equivalent of like £50, right? So I got about £50 per card. £50 was more like nearly 2 weeks' salary. Can you believe it? In those days. So I thought, this is really good. But I can't sort of take too much off Thomas Cook. So I thought, well, this guy recruited me, I'm going to recruit my own people. So I put an advert initially in the Surrey Comet, and took the words up and recruited a few people, about 4 people initially. And I just gave them application forms. They all had their own unique code number, which I fed through to the guy who owned the company. And it mushroomed from there, but I did get up to like 15 people at one stage selling these things. And what I had to do was continually push them, because people start, getting a bit of money, they get laid, you've got a boyfriend, girlfriend, you're going out, you're going on holiday. No, every single night I'll be on the phone for 2 hours, phoning these people up saying, how many calls do you make today? How many sales have you made today? Usual sort of thing. And it was great. It was fantastic. Purely just from, I hardly ever met these people, probably met them once or twice. As most people decided, really kick them up their behinds on the telephone, and as long as the money was coming in, they were happy. So that was really good. And that business went on even years later, the residue of it, without any activity. And I bought my first house on the proceeds with that at 20 in Leatherhead in Surrey. So I was thinking to myself, I'm not doing too badly. And I could see my parents were actually thinking, oh God, we really thought only my bit was richer, but he's doing all right. Twin brother, meanwhile, is in Switzerland at hotel school. Moving on from there, the next biggest break was an opportunity to move into the banking area of Thomas Cook. And then they didn't have credit cards, it was all to do with traveller's checks. I was given the sales area, and I was given the sales territory of East Africa. Everything down from Ethiopia, down through Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, Zambia, Tanzania, all the way down there to South Africa. And that was my patch. So I was out flying out there. Well, in those days, I can assure you, there were no Western hotels. There was no electricity after 5 o'clock in the evening. And I was doing training programs around the branches. and it was absolutely fabulous. I loved it. So I got into a bit of the training mode, which was really a bit of under soft selling, and that put me on the path of the next 35 years, really, in terms of payment systems. I found my forte. It was exciting because it was a global business. Then Thomas got taken over by Midland Bank, and I was incredibly, I want to say lucky, but perhaps I engineered it. I had a great boss, Brian Allison, who was parachuted in from Midland Bank to sort of get this organisation from its cosy, poorly managed environment to something a little bit more bleeding edge sort of organisation. And he, for some reason, he thought, oh, Richard, he's got good potential. And came to me one day and said, Richard, we've got a real opportunity to dramatically expand our business in Hong Kong. I'd like you to go out there and run that operation. Set up a joint venture with the Hong Kong Bank. I was thinking, well, I'm 23 years old now. God, I don't know. And most other people would say, actually, I've got a girlfriend, or not this month, but perhaps at the end of the year I could go. It was, but no, I was off. And off to Hong Kong, a little bit green around the ears, and basically never looked back. I did set up this joint venture with Hong Kong Bank, and travellers checks were booming. I went to Japan afterwards to do a similar thing there. And then after about 3.5 years, Brian said, okay, Richard, we want to come bring you back from Asia. I thought, okay. But no, I want you to go to Paris. We've got a big opportunity there, a big retail bank, and also want to do a joint venture with Société Générale. So off I went there. I was, by that time, I sort of tasted a bit of expatriate life. Hated expatriates, but loved the benefits. Going back into a real country, Hong Kong's fabulous, but it's quite a bit of a false environment. Going to Paris, it was very good, and I said to Brian, look, I don't speak a word of French, I'm used to some languages, I've only got O-level metal work. What am I going to do? He said, don't worry, we'll get all that sorted out. And I was an expatriate there and hated it, because it was quite a big operation there. Thomas Cook, it was probably maybe 100 people, and I'd fly in there. As an expatriate, the only expatriate with some fabulous apartment, and did a similar thing there. And it was, once again, it was getting back into a real working environment in a real world, in a big country, and it was, once again, really good. By that time, I think my parents were really quite proud. France was just around the corner, so hordes of people coming over for weekends, well, weeks in fact sometimes. A big enough apartment, they were all there. It was a fantastic time, and I set up a big network across Europe as well. So that was really good. But all good things came to an end, and Brian said, no, you're going to come back to London now. Well, in fact, not London. We moved from Berkeley Street in the heart of Mayfair to Peterborough. Anyone been to Peterborough? It's just outside Peterborough. It's between Peterborough and Stanford. There's a new sort of development area called Thorpe, where they built a brand new building there. And I wasn't going back to Berkeley Street, I was going back to near Stanford, Peterborough. I thought, oh well, I never really lived more than 10 or 15 miles from London, but we'll give it a go. And I actually loved it. You know, I formed a horse riding club, I went shooting, only clay pigeon shooting, didn't do the fishing bit, but I loved the environment up there. I bought this fabulous house, which was a church, converted church, and a big heated swimming pool in the back garden. And I tell you, as a bachelor, they have really good benefits having a swimming pool. It was really fantastic. Boy, after being a really big fish in a small pond, I suddenly had to cope with being, you know, an absolutely minute fish in a huge pond, and competing with a lot of peers and other people who are always after. And I didn't really, and I had a big job, but a difficult job to deliver on. The people people out there didn't really want me interfering, and the people up here in senior management wanted me to get greater control. So it's a real challenge, but I managed it. But I didn't like the head office environment, particularly being this little fish in a big pond. And lucky then I got a phone call. Someone I'd met along the road. That's what's always good to keep good contacts. And called and said, Richard, look, Visa is decentralised. It's going global next year. And what about working and helping open up our office in Asia Pacific, in Singapore? So I said, perfect timing, brilliant. So he said, well, it's not for a while, but come over to San Francisco, that's where we're headquartered, and we'll spend 6 or 9 months over there, part of the planning team. And that was my next big break in life. No hesitation going over there. By that time I was madly in love with Hillary, and thinking, God, what am I going to do with her? She did stay behind, but we did decide we were going to get married, because then I was going to Singapore, one of those countries where you can't put a girlfriend on. Most people go out, they've got a girlfriend, or whatever it was. So I went out to San Francisco for about 7 or 8 months, came back quite a few times. Hillary, meanwhile, was packing up the house and all the rest of it. And this is where I got into a company which was in its smallest stage. And it was a company with just probably globally 100 or so people. And today it's tens of thousands of people and turns over $4 trillion. I think it's probably the biggest company in the world today. Never had a year of less than double-digit growth. I mean, it's unique. And I was lucky enough in those 7.5 months in San Francisco to work with the founder of that company, Dee Hock. And because it was so small, it wasn't anything to do with me and my abilities or the position I was in. It was just small. You were thrown in, and to work with a genius. It's the only time I'm ever going to work for one, because you don't find them that often. This man was a genius, he really was. He was a visionary. And watching him operate, watching other people watching him operate, and seeing how he captured an audience, how he made decisions which in 10 or 20 years' time I could see were just so beyond anybody else's thinking. His vision of what it was going to be like and how he was going to get there, how he was going to build a global network. And that first stage of doing that was decentralizing from San Francisco to around the world, and setting up regions, and putting boards of directors in there, and building the business. So it was the most exciting time. San Francisco, I'm not a great California lover, but boy, was it a great place to live. A fabulous house in Foster City. And it was the American dream. It was for me, and Visa was that. And we put new challenges in. I wanted to move totally away from traveller's checks. I never mentioned the word again, because the traveller's checks were on the decline. Of course, the infamous credit card was on a massive trajectory of growth. So moved back to the UK, got married. 2 days later went out to India to sign up the first Indian bank to join Visa, Andhra Bank in Hyderabad in Andhra Pradesh, and then went on to Singapore, no time for a honeymoon. It was just one long honeymoon. And I was the only person out there for probably 6 weeks. I was working with the architects who were moving to a brand new building, getting temporary accommodation, getting all the licenses in place. And I stayed out there for another 3 years, once again working across the whole of Asia Pacific, doing probably monthly trips back to San Francisco, but constantly meeting very senior people. In Hong Kong, when I was there, it's probably one of the top destinations in the world. Everybody wants to go to Hong Kong if you're a board director or a CEO. It is one of the most magical places in the world. And I was the only person there to meet and greet these people. So I was never frightened of the chairman of Midland Bank coming over. All the people who worked for them were frightened, but I wasn't, because I was in Thomas Cook, which was a subsidiary of Midland Bank. And Singapore is also not quite as nice as Hong Kong, but also one of those places it was on a stopping off thing. So met lots of people, felt comfortable working with people. But also I saw along the time, you win some, you lose some. Some people stayed, some people left. Some people didn't leave on their own accord, they had to be let go. And I always used to look at that and think, why? most of them were not flexible. They weren't able to change. And I always think of Charles Darwin on this one in his sort of one of his famous quotes that it's not always the most the strongest or the most intelligent that survive, but those who adapt and change the most. And I always think I'm a bit like one of those animals. I'm very happy to adapt and continually change because you cannot stand still in life. It's constant change. Almost every minute, every hour, every day, certainly every year, every decade, you look back and you see the change. You've got to adapt. And I think I'm very good at adapting. I'm always saying yes. I'm a total optimist. My glass is always absolutely full to the brim. And that philosophy for me has worked well. It definitely isn't the only one which works well, but I do see people who aren't prepared to take any risks, aren't prepared to do something different. And I think that's something from the earliest days of opportunity. If you take opportunities as they come, very often they're going to lead, well, not always, but that's how it goes. So by that time I think my parents are very, very happy with me. I'm very happy with myself. And some 30 years later, I just left Visa last year. So I had 30 years with one company. It felt like more than one company because I worked in San Francisco, I've worked in London, I worked in Singapore, and then I was in Turkey for 3 years, also running their operation out there. So lots of different markets, and that's another thing about the world. Every market is unique. Let's say Coca-Cola or Visa, do you have a global advertising campaign, does it work? Well, it can actually work. But when you're getting down to business, you've got to understand the local business ethics, you've got to understand the market, the people, what to do, what not to do, what's offensive, what isn't offensive. So all the basic standards of how to operate. And that's a really important thing. In a world which is getting smaller, and opportunities getting greater. It's how do you go for those opportunities? You don't often have more than one chance. You want to try to get it right first time. So when I heard you guys presenting this, I saw a little bit of me there, definitely. Definitely not academic. I had got my O-level in metal. But opportunities are there, and it's what you take and what you make of those going forward. And give it a go. Be as positive as you can, talk and be open when it's the right time to do so, and I think for me, my progression through the company is quite difficult. You're with a very small company and the requirements change. D. Hop founder did go in the end. He was sort of, because his time had gotten, the company had moved on. I've worked for so many different presidents of Visa, and each one of them, their time has come and moved on, because the requirements of a company which has grown from turning over less than $500 million a year to over 4 trillion, 4,000 billion, and growing at 10%, it doesn't take many years to double your business. You need different skill sets. So for me to survive, I always think, with those senior managers, I've had some rough times. I've been right up on the peak and right down at the bottom. But what I have done is out-survived most. And I always say, something must be working. And I put it down to my own thing. I left there last year, I set up my own little company, really to do a bit of consultancy and prove I could do something on my own without a big corporate organisation behind. I had one big contract, I did that, proved it. I now work for a number of global consulting companies on telephone consulting because I'm a bit lazy and I want to do other things. So I'm still involved with with the payment system business. Luckily to be involved with this organisation and a few other things I've done. And also it's my anniversary today of climbing Kilimanjaro last year. You've got a great opportunity. You're with a great bunch of people. Absolute passion, you feel it all the time, you see it all the time. You understood it in a few minutes. And just think if that extra passion you're going to bring to that is going to be, that umbrella is going to be, 10 times the size by the time you finish. And you will learn an awful lot. And you will get some direction of what you want to do going forward. And you will achieve, when you work hard enough, what you want. And that, when you talk to your peers and your friends and your colleagues, you've got something very special to take advantage of. And if you could only just put that clock forward a few years and think, God, yes, haven't I done well? This has really worked. This was the seed of education which got me en route for where I'm going. Good luck.
Thank you.